beyond what we planned for this chat, but exactly. And after the moment when smoke starts coming out of the ears. Okay, hello everybody. This is Tom from Los Angeles, and I have two illustrious guests today. You probably know them already. One is Dario from Sweden, and the other one is Jordan Parsons from Oregon. And we are about 3.5 or maybe 4 months late to our Maybe Midrash appointment, which is okay, I guess, because we all have things to do. And so we started to read one particular book in May, which is the Confessions by St. Augustine. And that's how it went. We chose a very, easy breezy book to digest, and it took us a little bit longer than we thought. And now we are here, finally able to, at the very least, say what we thought and what the book left us. Maybe interesting for whoever is watching, the fact that we come from obviously different backgrounds, not only cultural backgrounds, Italian, American, and Bosnian in the case of Dario, and obviously your Swedish cultural background, Dario, but also from a spiritual standpoint, myself being Catholic, and you guys not being Catholic as of today, because maybe after reading St. Augustine, who knows?
Yeah, we are moving in that direction.
It's been a great experience to read it with you guys, and for me it was actually the second time I read it, and I still have many points. Very honestly, very humbly, I have still many points and many chapters that I don't feel I have really comprehended the basic points that Augustine is trying to make, because he was a philosopher, one of the best philosophers of history probably, and in the same short page he's able to go from very high metaphysics to this is my friend and this is what I did with my friend, to again extremely high metaphysics, and my brain couldn't completely keep up. Maybe we can start from this comment and see what you guys thought at a very high level. Then we can try to summarize the book if it's possible at all, and then ask some questions. Okay,
sounds good. Yeah, I was totally also struck by the style of it, which is so unusual, I guess, by modern standards, because it does have that kind of fluid ability to switch between the super personal and confessional, obviously, but also the extremely technical. And as a philosopher, he is just astonishingly brilliant, of course, and I agree, most of it is way over my head. But it's still engaging reading, I think, even when he's involved in these super convoluted and kind of robust logical arguments. He has such a flair for language, or at least in this translation, that it's just a joy to read. And then he can also, on top of that, be so approachable. Like you said, sometimes even in the same paragraph, talking about a friend of his, or which is interesting not only in the historical sense, but also it's just fascinating to have that kind of personal kind of communication with someone who lived so long ago and who is clearly making an effort to be approachable in his writing and succeeding, I think. So yeah, it's just a very interesting, unusual reading experience. I mentioned a couple of times it reminds me of reading Montaigne in that sense, who also has that approachability, but also brilliance, I think. So it's a similar experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can echo that. It is very very special text, really, because he's very passionate. It's a lot of passion in there, and in both in his praise to God, kind of trying to express his faith, in his philosophical reasoning, affection in looking back at the people of his life. There is so much feeling there, and it feels like it's something that he just had to write. He had to write it, and it was not like written for an audience. It was he was pouring his heart out. So in that sense, it didn't feel like something like somebody that want to convey certain message or want to teach somebody something. It was something that just had to be produced, just had to be written, right?
Yeah, that's such an excellent comment, Dario. The fact that you feel like he had to write it is not something that he's writing because somebody has asked him to write it. It's not something that he's writing because he's trying to achieve a practical goal. It's extremely existential. It's really his own life, his own existence. As a writer, as a philosopher, you can feel that there's no distance between the words that he is writing and his heart and his thoughts, right? And this is obviously in itself an incredible mark of a classic. But now, what is the Confessions of St. Augustine about? I remember when we started reading it, we were kind of lightheartedly joking and say, hey, from what I remember, the title itself, at least in the modern sense of confession, might be a little bit misleading, because today in the 21st century, we hear the word confession and we expect, who knows, what kind of gossip and sexual acts and whatever. But in the way that he used the word confessio, the Latin, it did not have this meaning at all. It was more something of a declaration of faith, or maybe even a description of a conversion. Maybe the meaning of confession as description of a conversion is more accurate, because the first time I read it, I remember thinking, okay, when are we get to the juicy part? When are we getting to the actual confessions? And all I was getting was this episode in his young life when he was a teenager, and he goes in the garden of a neighbor, he trespasses, and with his friends, they steal some pears, and he doesn't even eat any pear. He just he steals this pear, and he describes it as if it was, I'm telling you a secret. You know what I did? I actually stole some pears. Who cares? It's not really a great secret or something that we would expect with our modern sensitivity. But I wanted to make this distinction, because at least the way I understand it, he's not confessing in the sense of there's something secret or there's something particularly shameful that he has to air out, but it's more conversion and a confession towards God. The sense of shame probably is there, because there is always something. Anybody who experiences spiritual growth, whether in Christianity or any other major religion, I believe, you cannot experience a spiritual growth and look back and not feel a little sense of shame, right? Because for the errors and the mistakes that you did in the past. At least this is I'm saying something that I think I understand, but you guys tell me what you think.
I think when it comes to his confession, there I agree. This episode with him stealing fruit. Who didn't do that? He was just he was kind of reflecting upon the meaningless act. Really, and when it comes to more kind of the juicy stuff that you would expect from confession, somebody going to a Catholic church and confessing to Holy Father, the only thing I get there is this kind of sexual part, because vice was not really alien to this guy. So he's been around doing things for a long time. And not really being happy of. But I agree with you, Tom. They are not about the fruit stealing, not about the sexual stuff. Right? That's not what confession is. What I perceive as a confession is basically his confession of the, as you say, of the journey of faith, because he's been struggling, from what I read from it, very much from detaching from being stuck in the material world, and in anchoring his faith to material things. He's been for a while part of this Manichaean movement.
Yeah.
Right. And he was also being a teacher in rhetorics and knowing very very much about classical philosophy. Aristotle. There is a lot of Platonism in his way of thinking. So he had this material link throughout the book. He's coming back to it. He's becoming weaker and weaker, and he's detaching more and more from that, and kind of seeking connection with God outside of his material incarnation. So I would say it is more about that than about what you would normally mean with confession.
Yeah, I agree. I like that as a kind of general description of the arc of his journey, is moving away from a material understanding of the universe, right? I mean, he did embrace Manichaeism, and it's interesting to look at it now, because one of the kind of core philosophical things he struggles with, it seems, is he cannot at first conceive of the idea of a God that doesn't exist, in space as like a physical being. I think he talks about God having hair and fingernails, and like he just had this, he couldn't get over the idea of thinking of kind of some kind of extension in space being God. So I think I agree. So it eventually turns into, kind of a Platonist kind of approach to reality. But, and we can get to this later, but he doesn't deny the power and the goodness of the material world either. He has a beautiful passage where he says, whatever is good. And he's talking about material reality. So it's a very delicate kind of balance there. And I think it's over my head, but it seems to me that he walks that tightrope pretty elegantly.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of the passages of the entire book that actually struck me more than others, which is where he talks about the scriptures. Because in his times, like Dario mentioned, like you mentioned, he is writing about his truth seeking. He was looking for truth, and trying to discern truth among all these type of, let's say, offerings that were given to him from an intellectual standpoint, from the Manichaeist offering, from the Platonist offering, from all everything that was available in his times, right? And obviously the Christian offering was one offering. His mother was Christian, and she had been a little, maybe gently prodding him in that direction, but it's not clear how intensely. But at the same time, the first impact that he had with the scripture was very interesting. I have kind of bookmarked that passage, and I would like to read 2 lines where he says, this is actually in book 4, I believe. He says, so I resolved to make some study of the sacred scriptures and find what kind of books they were. But what I came upon was something not grasped by the proud, not really revealed either to children, something utterly humble in the hearing, but sublime in the doing. And I was not of the nature to enter into it or bend my neck to follow it. When I first read those scriptures, I did not feel in the least what I have just said. So his impression was absolutely negative. He read it and he did not like it. He didn't feel a personal draw into the scriptures. He then goes on saying that he found too many incoherencies, and it was really we're talking about one of the biggest geniuses of Christianity here, and that's what really strikes me: the fact that he approached this book, the Bible, and Saint Augustine approached it, did not, maybe we could even say, did not understand the point of it,
He barely mentioned it.
Exactly. And then only later. So does it mean that does it mean to us that the Bible is not a book that can shine of its own light by itself? Does it help us maybe understand that we shouldn't be too literal with a document like the Bible, because the words themselves, just you by yourself and the book, are not going to go much farther or very, in very interesting places unless you have other elements and forces in play that could be divine grace, the church, or anything else. Maybe that's the way that I interpreted this.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. His writing about scripture is pretty sparse overall. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to be the main vehicle of his coming to Christianity, right? I would say that was mostly his mother. But it does play a role. And at one point near the end of the book, I was just looking for the quote. Unfortunately, I can't find it. He does talk a little bit more about scripture, and he's full of beautiful metaphors, in my opinion. It's just full of them. And the way he talks about scripture is, it's like a very small spring at the top of a mountain, and that it has all these various tributaries that go down the mountain.
Oh, right.
I read the confessions in Swedish. This is a Swedish bekännelser. It's a great version. It's from 1990, very good one. And the only one that I have in English is this one. It's a short one. It's a Penguin Great Ideas. It's just more than 100 pages. It's selected like best things there. It's a quote here on the it says, as a youth I had prayed to you for chastity and said, give me chastity, continence, but not yet. And it's connected to his all, most of the sins he was able to kind of dispose of very early, but chasing women, that was a bit difficult for him to let go. And it's a kind of like, okay, it's framing the whole sinful nature of his. And then it's like selection, the best of. One thing that I though missed here, I was a bit surprised and disappointed that I didn't find it this English version. There is in book 10. Now, first 9 books, it's his like autobiography that is continuously spiced with these philosophical reflections and transformation of his faith.
Yeah, it's his story.
And then it ends, chapter 9, it ends, his mother dies and he cuts it off there. And then in chapter 10, he comes into kind of, like he's giving us, okay, where he is at, in his mind and his soul when it comes to his faith and his understanding of the world. It's really, really brilliant chapter. I love chapter 10 or book 10, right? One thing that here is not at all, it's the biggest part of book 10, which is about memory. He's writing about memory. That's one of the most fantastic things.
I agree.
So I wonder, what these people who did this editing, did they read it? Did they understand it? It's just but this part of when he's talking about memory, about how memory is basically forming our being, right? And how the memory works, and how the memory it's a changing of perceptions and helping us to evolve as a person, and how strong it is by pulling us into the material world, and then he's striving to decouple himself and reach God despite God not being a part of a memory itself, right? Because memory is material thing. And one of the passages there, I don't have it in English. You guys have it in English there. It is in book 10, 10:27. It's one of the most beautiful parts. Yeah. So this. Let me. I found one. It's one translation by J.G. Pilkington.
Okay.
This is an older translation.
Mm-hmm.
So it says like this: "Too late did I love thee, O fairness so ancient and yet so new. too late did I love thee.
Mm.
For behold, thou wert within, and I without, and there did I seek thee. I, unlovely, rushed heedlessly among the things of beauty thou madest. Thou wert with me, but I was not with thee. Those things kept me far from thee, which unless they were in thee were not. Thou called and cried aloud, and forced open my deafness. Thou did gleam and shine and chase away my blindness. Thou did exhale odors, and I drew in my breath, and do pant after thee. I tasted, and I do hunger and thirst. Thou didst touch me, and I burned for thy peace.
Wow.
You know, so this is like, you know, I kind of, you know, I'm shivering now. It is, you know, so that they basically miss it in this one. I just can't, you know, comprehend it. But okay,
Yeah.
it's only
Well, I mean, and what let's say these words remind us is the struggle, because the Confessions, especially the first part, as you said, the first big chunk, is an autobiographical struggle to enter into Christianity, to understand God, to understand the scriptures as well, from the point of view of somebody who was extremely rational in his and intellectual in his approach to reality. This is why St. Augustine resonates more with people like us, let's say, people who are more bookish, more rational, more intellectual. Some other people are born and they're religious, they have their own religion, they think in a different way, maybe let's call it less sophisticated or less complicated, not like St. Augustine for sure. But I feel like St. Augustine speaks more to the people who have the strongest objections to religion, the strongest objections to the concept of God, because our rationality keeps working in that sense and say, hey, if this doesn't make sense, how can I trust it? How can I believe it? And this tension between these two poles is constantly operating in this book, in Augustine psychology. I think it was Jordan who mentioned in our Voxer. It's a quick comment, Jordan. I'm gonna read it from Voxer. I think it's especially interesting that one of his chief hangups was that he was unable to think of God as having a non-physical existence. It's odd that such a great mind wrestles so much with that. Even the most unreflective Christians of today would probably have no problem with the idea that God does not have a physical body. That was Jordan's thought, and Dario replied, "This is still one of the main arguments of atheists today, which is, where is this God? Show me where God is. What are you talking about? You know." This is what makes it so interesting, even purely from an intellectual standpoint. How can you have people who are intellectual, who are intelligent like Augustine, putting all their belief and trust in something that apparently doesn't make any sense?
Right. Yeah, I mean, right. But he came at it with such, as you said, such vigorous analytical skill that, you know, I wouldn't say he's going to convince anyone to believe who doesn't already believe, but certainly if any book could do it, this would be the one. But, you know, he also knows when to let go of that, I feel like. Like Dario just read that passage, which to me reads more like a prayer, you know, rather than some kind of philosophical argument. And there are large portions in the book where he goes on these beautiful kind of rhapsodic prayer digressions. And those are like my favorite passages. But so certainly he does have a kind of almost mystic apprehension of things too. But he's able to marry that so elegantly with his analytical mind. Like there's that beautiful passage where I mentioned it earlier, where he goes on, it's a very involved, like philosophical argument, but it ends with that wonderful statement where he says, whatever is good, which is just such a beautiful thought. And the way that he can get there through his rational mind is pretty astonishing, I think.
Yeah. It is a prayer. I think we should read the entire book as a prayer. He's not speaking to us. his back is turned towards us. He's speaking to God, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's
directly sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with that. That's what I meant. You know, it had to be written because it was some urging him, and also, you know, I get a feeling that he wasn't really happy with what he accomplished, because, you know, the last chapter 13, at least to me, it has been, you know, the feeling, you know, when you read it, it's like you are reading a book that the whole book that have, you know, so many different dimensions, but it's, you know, kind of it's coming like a braid. You know, everything is coming in, you know, these different aspects, both the prayer, logical reason, and everything is coming. And then in chapter 30, everything dissolves into, you know, I kind of lost him everywhere. And I kind of felt, you know, like, I don't believe that he was too happy with how this ended here, because it wasn't, you know, it wasn't really like, okay, like a coherent mass, that something was finished with a kind of a conclusion. It was, you know, very, you know, and this is, you know, I think this is difficulty in as you're saying here, Tom, you know, with approaching rationally faith, because, you know, as a rational being, as, you know, for instance, as a scientist or whatever, you would like to kind of, you prove everything through experimentation in the material world and so on and so forth. Obviously, you know, you can't do it. You can't do it here, so you need to kind of explore it through mind, right? Yeah. And he's also saying that the God exists only in the thought; it doesn't exist in the material world, you know. And you know, you need to explore it there, but you need to be careful of bias of goodwill that will carry you away into something that you cannot kind of, you know, justify for yourself, like, okay, into logically incoherent conclusions.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, and this is extremely difficult to keep together, even for such a genius like Saint Augustine, let alone for us. So yeah. So it's really yeah.
It's almost like what you're saying, and what Augustine demonstrates is that rationality is such an incredible weapon that no other being on earth has, maybe somebody else in the universe, but we don't know, and it's so strong, so powerful, right? But it's a double-edged sword, because the other side of rationality is that we cling so much to it that we tend to see everything only through that. I'm obviously very biased to Dante Divine Comedy, but a big, who knows why, but a big reason, something that, you know, when you really simplify the Divine Comedy, you can see Virgil incarnating reason and rationality, who at a certain point of the spiritual journey, of the spiritual growth, has to go away, has to leave and say goodbye, because he's not able to keep up with the human spirit anymore, with what the human spirit desires and needs. There is something else that has to intervene beyond reason and beyond rationality. This is in line with what Augustine is telling us. But I don't know anybody who has been able to express this tension between rationality and the spiritual part of the human being as well as Augustine, even to the point of when we think of the actual conversion scene, when he's in the garden with his friend, and you know, things happen that if you read it, it could be a TV drama, because it's so intense, right? And he cries and cries, and he's almost pulling his hair. Remember that scene is so incredible. He's suffering because it's almost like there are two people inside his own head. There are two, and one has to win. He wants one to win, but it's very difficult. And in that moment, he makes that pivotal decision to let one of the two take over and win. And that's the conversion, if that makes sense to you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's where this, you know, when this bias enters the scene, right? When you start kind of, you know, interpreting things with the will for a certain conclusion rather than having an explorative approach, right? And this is and I still, you know, even after conversion, he manages not to take it too far. He still manages to have some, even if he doesn't, you know, because you know, agnosticism here is, you know, it's not of God, and that's a sin, right? So he's not you can't, he's not right out agnostic. You still feel that there is a kind of, at least I feel it, that there is some, you know, kernel of kind of uncertainty and doubt there, that he's trying to deal with through praise and through you know, these beautiful mystical prayer passages.
Yeah.
Right? So he's kind of filling that void with that. That's the, you know, that's my feeling.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of will. So you know, I would really love to read something, you know, so theologically, you know, profound, of a later date from him, something that he wrote after Confessions, to see, you know, where is this going?
Yeah.
Where did he arrive?
Yeah, it's a great point, Dario, because it's not that he gets to an end. I mean, the only end, of course, of the Confessions as a book is God, and he already gets there in the very first line of the book, right? Which is probably or arguably the most famous one, which is, God, you have made us for you, and our heart is restless, but is able to rest only in you. This is a message that he kind of sent through the centuries, and it's hit so many people in Christianity over time. It hit me. It's a message that hits especially the particularly intellectually curious people and intellectually even anxious, if you want to use that word, because Augustine was nothing if not anxious. You know, you can feel his anxiety, you can feel his intensity, you know, every single line that he's writing. But somebody that anxious, he says, I actually have found a place where I am not anxious anymore. And that's the only place in the world where I feel, and it kind of reminds me, Dario, actually, one conversation you and I had some time ago, maybe even last year, or a couple of months, when you looked at me and you said, hey, so with this Christianity of yours, you know, have you actually, is this the answer to your existential anxiety? And I said, well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking what you're saying here is that I'm looking, you know, there are lots of, I have so many notes and everything. I can't he's actually coming back to hope.
Hope.
Yes, he's coming back to hope as a ignition of faith when belief doesn't hold so strong. He's writing somewhere that, you know, I have it in my notes here, because that was something that passage was something that gave me hope that there is a hope with me.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's one of the beautiful things, and I try to imagine reading Augustine from a non-Christian standpoint. One of the beautiful things is that he's so great at articulating objections. And to be completely honest with you, this is also this was the mark of St. Thomas Aquinas in the Thomistic. The Thomistic style was, I'm not going to tell you a truth as it is. I'm going to start from its complete opposite, and I'm going to try to articulate its complete opposite in the best possible way that I can. This is how the Summa Theologia of St. Thomas works. He starts and he articulates objections to his articles of faith so well that when you read one of these objections, you're like, oh, that's true. I'm sold. But that's not what he means to say. He means to say the opposite. So there is a similarity, I think, in the way that Augustine articulates his objections, perfectly expressing what we feel even today, probably, right?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, however, that tradition of you know, analytical thought within theology is maybe not as prevalent as it used to be, right? I mean, I think it might be making a comeback, but certainly the rational way of looking at things has been, co-opted by the materialistic and the atheistic way of looking at things, right? So there's not a whole lot of um, uh, religious analytic thought anymore. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems to me that most people who think like that gravitate away from religion, which I don't think is necessarily justified, but culturally, that seems to be what happens. And it's a shame, because part of the tradition of Christianity is this very rigorous, logical approach to theology. So it's a shame that has kind of been lost.
I love that I love that you're touching on this, Jordan, because it's pretty crucial. It's kind of, to me, this is the crux of the matter for today's world. The fact that so many people are basically missing out. You know, when Augustine says, "Ancient beauty, I discovered you too late," so many people are missing out on the subtlety, on the sophistication, on the rational perfection of so much of Christian theology. Now, once you get there, then you're completely free to trust or not trust, to have your faith or not have your faith, because that's entirely personal and intimate, obviously. But like you say, in our world today, I don't know whose responsibility it is, you know, TV, media, the church itself, many different reasons. The idea that Christianity as a theology, as a set of concepts, is highly sophisticated has been a little bit lost.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, from my perspective, coming in as a, you know, from my background, coming in, it is. I don't feel that it's being lost. I'm discovering that there is that kind of dimension in the first place, right? Because, you know, when you think about Christianity, you think about the Bible, you think about church, you think about Christmas and Easter and the life of Jesus as it is presented in the popular culture. That's what you think of, and then it's arguing about, oh yeah, you believe in old fairy tales and blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff. Nobody's ever touching about the theology. And then you read things like this, then you read like Joseph Ratzinger, you know, he's you know, thoughts on God, or you go and read, you even step out of Christianity and go into Islam and read you know, Sufi thinkers.
That's true.
Where you basically, and its same concepts are discussed in the same way, and that's where theology is. So theology is completely lost it's, I don't know if it's lost. It is not present at all.
Yeah.
in general, you know, public discourse. So I think that you know, religion would be more plausible for many people, for more people, if the type of discussion would be, you know, about the nature of being, a nature of God, rather than, you know, going to scriptures and not exploring a deeper meaning of it, but, you know, just going to, you know, to the superficial story that is just in front of us, and then, you know, following priests in churches, and then you know, fighting about, you know, are they pedophiles, are they not pedophiles, and all that, you know, excuse my French, bullshit. So it's you know, really need to get into more honest intellectual discussion about these things.
Yeah.
And I don't want to necessarily point fingers, but I feel like a lot of the blame goes to kind of the evangelical, kind of Protestant approach to the religion, which is so fundamentalist, and it takes the Bible literally, and it makes itself such an easy target for more rational thinkers, right? So then it becomes this straw man on kind of both sides of the issue, and it just clouds everything up. which is of course not to insult Protestants or evangelicals. I just feel like culturally that has done a lot of damage to atheists and to believers.
Yeah.
You know, and it is possible. It is actually possible to discuss Bible from a a deeper theological perspective, like this fantastic guy is discussing. You know, if you look at last 3 chapters of it, when he's taking up and dissecting Genesis, right? You know, he goes into there is lots of discussion about the nature of time, for instance. Yeah, and the separation of God and God's creation, and time being a phenomenon that the God is created in a world, and outside of it God exists, timeless, and in the concept of time and all that, coming back to book of Genesis. In that way, it is, I think it would be much more plausible discussion even for the so-called atheists.
Yeah.
Taking it from that perspective, because then you are in the kind of realms where you actually honestly can say that we don't know, we cannot know, we can speculate, we can hope, and we can also have a faith in things. Everything is okay when you discuss it that way. But if you discuss it, whether that miracle happened or that, or in this and that, then it becomes just childish fights.
Yeah. I think, as we were saying before, Augustine, in all this long prayer that he does in the Confessions, he's very good at playing devil's advocate with himself. So on one hand, his psychological insight is unbelievable, and when let's try to play devil's advocate ourselves with the book, right, and try to object, maybe even with a cynical eye, as an exercise, and look at the book in its totality, and realize that this is a guy who had his mother who was trying to push him towards a particular worldview, and he was rejecting it because he didn't think he was intelligent enough. And then after year after year after year after year of his mother patiently being rooted in this worldview, then he flips and changes his point of view. So I'm cynical. I've read Freud, who, by the way, he hated religion and he hated God. And so I'm going to say, hey, this is a perfect example of Oedipical issues. He wanted, his love for his mother brought him to Christianity, because where his mind, his intellect didn't reach, his love for his mother was bigger, and so that's what that was the psychological gear or lever that brought him into Christianity. Okay, I could say that, but I would be cynical, and I'm not a cynical person at all. I'm the opposite of a cynical person. So the way I see it is, hey, maybe there is a little bit of a grain of truth there, but the truth, though, you have to see it under the proper light, and the proper light is the love for his mother was a real thing. The love for our mothers is a real thing. Okay, there's no need to inconvenience Freud or Oedipal complexes or anything like that. What's more important? Okay, what's more important to our way of being, to what I am, my ego or my existence? Is it my ability to think about to wrap my little cortex power around the world, or is it the love of my mother? It's just a simple question, and I think the answer should be the same for everybody, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
There are other ways to express it, but it's a way to it's a way to go back to the concept of Dante leaving Virgil behind. So what's Beatrice is another example of that. You can say, oh, look at how Oedipical Dante was. He ends his majestic Divine Comedy with a prayer to Mary, to this female idealized character of Mary. Well, guess what? We all have it. That's how we are made. This is how we are born, because we're born from them. We came out of them,
Right, right, and that's valid, I think, is key. You know what I mean? It's not some kind of it doesn't cheapen however you're coming at this thing. Like for me, my own, I wouldn't call myself necessarily Christian. I do believe in God, I would say, and that comes from a largely emotional response, right? Because I am of the opinion that there are moral truths, objective moral truths that are right. Certain things are right for all times and all places, and certain things are wrong for all times and all places. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that is a religious conviction, right? I have no logical reason to believe that, but the idea of letting go of that is just totally inconsistent with everything about me. So therefore, I feel like that has to count for something, right? I think it's a similar thing. The relationship to one's mother doesn't count for nothing here.
Yeah, I realize it's difficult. I mean, we knew from the beginning that we're talking about a difficult book, therefore we would get to difficult concepts to express, and we're doing whatever we can, right?
Yeah, it is. And he's talking about, it's quite interesting, these universal truths. Because when you're talking about this, your last thing here, Jordan, about the universal morality, for instance, like C.S. Lewis writes about that in Mere Christianity.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, as well, a very, very cool way. And he's Augustine is coming to that as well, and having a kind of Platonistic view on the world, is saying that there are certain there are certain truths in
objective truths. Yes.
Yeah, and then the world is modeled on that. And even my engineering mind can understand the concept, because this is how you create your basically computer systems, the whole lots of the whole new the World Wide Web and this next generation of internet that we have here is based on the ontologies, where certain information objects they have they master, and then the data is then replicated and built up into and connected and so on. So everything that we see on internet is based on basically models that are kind of universal ontologies, and it's coming, that whole concept is coming from from philosophy, and we are building artificial world based on that, in the same way like according to him, God has built the world, programmed the world, or whatever you want to call it. So it's that type of explanation, it resonates kind of with the rational.
Yeah. I know that very interesting. I read recently that some AI researchers are using the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas while they analyze human thinking. In other words, you can really, because these are the best thinkers in our history. So if you are somebody who wants to understand the best way that a human being can think, you go to the peaks, right? And I really believe St. Augustine is one of them. St. Thomas is another one. And
they were not distracted by this.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're done. We have no chance to get to that level of mental clarity and really limpid thinking that transpires from this type of books. I read it and I think sometimes, how is it possible to write almost precisely every single passage of thought that my own brain makes around something? That's the ability of putting into words something that I don't know if anybody even today is able to do. But if we are, from a scientific point of view, to imitate or even replicate the mental process of human beings with AI, then we have to go to the best. We have to go to the very best examples, no?
The chapter, the passage of memory, chapter 10, it would work. I think that a computer scientist would love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it would be a mistake to reason in just compartments. This is theology, this is philosophy, this is modern physics and computer science. Everything is correlated, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And on that note, I do wonder if, as long as we're playing devil's advocate here, if Augustine had been born in modern times, would he have found his way to religion, right? I feel like that kind of, culturally, those kinds of people are not gravitating to religious thoughts anymore for whatever reason. So it'd be an interesting thought experiment to see where he would end up if he was born today. I don't know, would he be a physicist? Would he be philosopher? Would he be a computer programmer? Or maybe he would just not do anything because he'd be on his phone all day.
I think it is. I wouldn't expect him to gravitate towards religion at early age, but later, because it's when you explore the domains of science, and you get into understanding of material world very much. You still, at least to me, you cannot fill the hole in your soul. It doesn't give you solace. All these things that it doesn't. There's no comfort of kind of I get it, right? And then you start seeking something else. And when you get older, then you start exploring. You feel more confident in, okay, I know this stuff, so let me explore. I'm not afraid of becoming some wacko. It's I know this stuff. Let me explore these other things. You feel confident enough, but that requires that you are not cynical, that you are not kind of condescending to people that are looking for truth outside of the physical world. You need to have your open mind, and I think if you have that, at some point you gravitate towards religion. Not necessarily do you stay there, but at least you do explore that.
Right.
So that's what.
Yeah, and not necessarily, the same religion. That's a completely different chapter of discussion. But the variety of religions in the world has been for many people an obstacle to faith as well, because they look around, they say, hey, it's a market. So if all of them are true, then none of them can be true. But there are strong and sophisticated arguments to follow to address that objection as well. It's not for this video to to dive into that. Okay, we'll do another one. But it's really I'm feeling humbled by this book every time I go back to it. Every time in our life when we start to think that we are maybe a little too smart, let's go back to St. Augustine to kind of remind us, put us in our place.
Yeah, because it is definitely logical and understandable what is right. Say for chapter 13, still I don't get it, but the other things, you really need to concentrate. Many times I had to go back several times. Certain passages, read again and again and again, and then leave it. And come the next day, read again, and then it clicks. You just, you have to be in a certain mode to get in, and then okay, I get it. I understand what he means here. So it is it gives a lot, and this is something I usually don't reread things. But this is definitely something that I will not get any comfort with kind of got it, read it, because there is still, I feel there is still so much here that I don't grasp.
Right. Yeah, much like Dante, it's kind of the entire world in a single little book. I finished it back in May, and then I was returning to it to prepare for this discussion, and I was just blown away at how I could just fall into it again. There was so much I had missed the first time around. So yeah, I'll definitely be returning to it at some point.
Yeah.
I'd be I'd be curious, going back to the point that we were making earlier on of the degradation of the concept of religion as something intellectually complex and satisfying. I'd be really curious to try and understand where that's coming from, what exactly caused it. Maybe it's not just one thing. I understand that it's a complex set of causes in the 20th century and probably even earlier, with the goal not to say this is true or this is not true, but simply with the goal of reminding people that it's not simple, that it's just not simple. When you teach religious concept to a kid, to a child, necessarily you have to simplify things, and then you're going to wait for this child to grow up to then, okay, let's look at it from a slightly different angle, more intellectually satisfying. But it seems like in our society we have remained at that level of the 6-year-old, this is it, goodbye. And I don't know exactly why. It's something as of today for each of us to work on and to use our own curiosity.
I think one reason why we are there is because religion actually is today, and through hundreds of years back, in most of the societies has not really been religion. It was basically politics. Just a vehicle to get the power over people. So that's and then there is no really honesty in exploring the nature of divinity, of of being, of the universe, and all that.
Yeah, that's true, Dario. Although I think back, even in Augustine times and St. Thomas times, it was always a little bit of a dichotomy. Even within the church, in the history of the church, there were always let's call the power-hungry people, kind of the dogs, and unfortunately, some of them became popes in history, right?
Yeah.
And in some, and at the same time, in parallel, you had real truth seekers and really honest people. That's where the real value of religion lies, in my opinion, not in the politics.
But
Right.
when I made the mention of politics, it is there is one. If you look at the Christianity, for instance, there is one type of politics that is happening within Vatican and in the domain of Vatican's influence. But then there is politics in the real political world that is using whatever I mean with that. I'm thinking, for instance, Henrik VIII. Henrik VIII, right? So the way he was using the church as a vehicle of getting what he wants privately, right? Both in his own marriage and in getting control over England by creating Church of England and all of that, and then people just follow because you need to be a part of a team, right? And this is if I look at how religion is utilized as a political vehicle in where I'm coming from, Balkans, for instance, it is centuries same story where basically the priests are getting involved in real politics. You see it today, for instance, the war in Ukraine and participation of a patriarch of Russian church and so on. So it is too much interlinking of a church and real politics, and that there is no place for really a theology there. Where is theology there? Nowhere.
Yeah.
I agree for sure, but I do think any human institution is subject to that kind of corruption. You know what I mean? It's not exclusively religion where this is happening.
No.
So, and I think it goes back to the beginning of the church. Probably there's going to be corruption, certainly, but I think it does a serious disservice to the heritage of religion if we ignore the intellectual tradition that comes with it. You know what I mean? It really is a great loss.
Yeah. So wonderfully put, Jordan, because really it's part of the inheritance of, I think, every religion in itself, or of major religion, to know, to realize from the beginning how things are gonna pan out in terms of power, politics, and in the future, because that's the concept of original sin. Is that just a little story to say that we should be ashamed of ourselves? No, it's a story that is very ancient, even older than Christianity, that's there to say every single human organization is going to suck. Okay. That's the meaning of original sin. It's inside of ourselves. We are made in this dysfunctional way, in this messy way, and even if it's not an easy solution to grasp, at least at the individual level, this is what ancient tradition is offering us. Personally, I trust it. When I'm faced with big problems in my life and I don't know what's going to happen, my instinct today is to say, I do have faith, meaning that I trust that God makes things work out for the best, because I try to do His will. And while I realize that these are words that outside of the Christian sphere might not even make sense or apply to concrete things, they do make a lot of sense to me. And 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 the most important thing is that they work. It actually does work. My life has become much better from my conversion to Christianity. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe not.
You're talking about the religious experience individually.
Yeah.
Right? Your individual experience. Also, Saint Augustine is talking about, again, back to chapter 30, and I'm quite fascinated with chapter 30, not understanding it at all. He's talking about Genesis and saying that everybody can find truth in Genesis in its own way and has its own interpretation, and it's good that it's unclear, so that everybody really can make an effort and explore it and arrive into something productive for every single person. And that's when you're on that individual level, it is very productive, both personally and and you as a citizen of the world as well. But as soon as there is insistence on community and evangelism, that's where things become messy. When you start basically kind of imposing things on other people, then politics come in, then power struggles and all that. So as long as we can keep this kind of on individual growth, individual development, and individual perspectives, I think that religious is really tremendous source of good, I believe. But as soon as you get into communities, then you are in pretty dangerous waters.
So you like religion, you don't like church, in other words.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are see perfectly well what the problems, what the challenges are, and I think I tend to see that as well, and so the really great thing is that despite our different backgrounds, we share this type of general approach to problems. I don't know if I don't know. I love Jordan's question when you say Augustine today. How would he end up? It gets obviously complicated and it's just an exercise, but there are the action of religion in community is such a difficult thing to measure. It's impossible to measure. Like Dario says, you can see it at an individual level, but then what happens on the community is always a mess. The community starts from the individual. So You sort out the very first cell of it, and then you move out to the community. Augustine seems to be saying the same. He seems to be saying, I am not even thinking or dedicating my thoughts to community, to group and organization, before having sorted out all these complexities and challenges that I have inside myself as an individual. Maybe some communities tend to suck a little bit more than others, depending also on times, on eras in history. Anyway, we probably have gone a little bit beyond what we planned for this chat, but exactly. And after the moment when smoke starts out coming out of the ears, we have to stop and get some sugars. No, thank you very much, guys. All in all, it seems like your experience of reading the Confessions was a positive one, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
I tend to suggest this book to anybody, even without even mentioning religion, just because of the ability to express human thought. That is one of the most stunning characteristics of this book for me. But so hopefully this chat will be also sparking some thoughts for somebody else, or inspiring somebody to read it.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Would be nice.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from anything else, it's just a great piece of literature, whether or not you're religious. So
yeah,
definitely worth reading.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, guys.